This is the unpleasant truth, the simple calculation you have avoided for decades. If you are approaching 50 or have already passed it, you have one primary resource left, and it is not money. It is the remaining years you have to compound wisdom, to subtract stupidity, and to simply stop making the errors you have known how to avoid since you were 30. 50 is not a milestone for celebration. It is a terrifying checkpoint. It is the final non-negotiable moment to look in the mirror, not with the self-serving bias you have perfected, but with the cold, unforgiving clarity of arithmetic. The single greatest advantage you had, time, is now a finite, rapidly shrinking commodity. You believe you are entering the harvest phase of life. But I see a critical mass of bad habits, unexamined biases, and a staggering reluctance to use the wisdom you supposedly acquired. You've accumulated houses, cars, maybe capital, but you have failed to accumulate the one thing that truly matters, an avoidance mindset. This is not a message of hope. Hope is for the impatient and the unprepared. This is a message of necessary, brutal realism. You must understand that at 50, your task is no longer to seek brilliance. That chase is for the young fools still intoxicated by the promise of easy success, the ones who think one single brilliant idea will excuse them from a lifetime of discipline. Your only serious job now is to avoid the standard predictable ways of failing. If you continue to believe that success is achieved by adding brilliant ideas, you will continue to fail. Success, particularly at this age, is a product of subtraction. It is achieved by removing the sloth, the envy, the self-pity, the complexity, and the ideological baggage that has consistently, predictably, and justly destroyed better men and women than you for all of recorded history. You're about to learn, or more likely, be reminded of, the single most powerful lesson in human conduct, the core of what the great German mathematician Carl Jacobi called invert. Always invert. We will not discuss how to win. The world is saturated with cheap advice on how to win. We will discuss how to simply, finally, stop losing, because if you can stop losing, the winning takes care of itself. The inversion doctrine, the game of subtraction, the greatest fortunes in this world, in finance, in relationships, in health, are not built by hitting home runs. They are built by consistently, boringly avoiding strikeouts. They are built by a relentless, almost tedious dedication to not being stupid, and yet you spend your life and your money and your dwindling time seeking the complex, the novel, the brilliant. You read the books on how to get rich, how to find perfect love, how to optimize your brain. You never stop to seriously ask the inverse. What guarantees misery? What makes failure inevitable? This is the mindset you need now. The mindset of the subtraction specialist. The engineer of avoidance. Go backward. Take your perfect life, the goal you envision for your 70s, and reverse engineer its destruction. How do you guarantee absolute, predictable failure? How do you ensure you arrive at 75 broke, alone, and full of regret? You do it, first, through unreliability. This is the simplest and most effective way to fail. You simply promise things to yourself, to your spouse, to your children, to your colleagues, and you routinely fail to deliver. You allow the simple, predictable force of sloth to paralyze you. You confuse activity with accomplishment. You think a long meeting or an early morning is work. True work is focused, consistent, and brutally honest about what creates value and what is merely a performance for your own ego. Unreliability is the quicksand of character. If you are unreliable, no virtue, no amount of brilliance can save you. It doesn't matter what your virtues are. You will crater immediately. You become a black hole of wasted energy, and the best people, the reliable people, will simply root their lives around you. They will stop trusting you, stop depending on you, and eventually stop thinking of you at all. At 50, if people cannot set their watch by your word, you have failed the fundamental test of adulthood. Second, you guarantee failure through overspending and debt. You have reached 50, and you still have not mastered the most fundamental rule of long-term success: spend less than you earn. This is high school math, not financial theory, and yet the desire to signal status, the need to keep up with the neighbor who is also on a treadmill to ruin, has you trapped in a consumer cage. You trade future freedom for immediate, fleeting comfort. You choose the ephemeral pride of a new luxury, a car you can't afford, a house that owns you, over the ironclad security of financial independence. You are signaling to the world that you are a success, while your bank statement quietly screams that you are a slave. The man who spends every penny he earns will always be a slave to the market, a hostage to his employer, and a servant of his own low character. He cannot say no to an unethical boss. He cannot take a year off to care for a sick relative. He cannot seize the rare, life-changing opportunity that requires liquid capital. He has no options. Debt is the most effective modern tool for self-enslavement. If you are 50 and in change to your lifestyle, you have misunderstood the entire purpose of money. Third, you guarantee failure through uncontrolled passion and ideology. You let your fleeting emotional impulses dictate your strategic decisions. You chase the hot stock, the latest trend, the emotional high of a drastic change, and you confuse impulse with insight. You are a 50-year-old child still seeking the easy answer, the quick fix. Or worse, you become captured by an extremely intense ideology. This is a form of mental slavery that cabbages up the mind. As Munger would say, you stop seeing the world as it is. You see it only through the distorted lens of your chosen team. You filter all new information through your pre-existing beliefs, accepting what confirms them and violently rejecting what challenges them. This makes you predictable. It makes you a pawn, and it makes you a pawn, and it makes you, in a word, stupid. You have traded your individual hard. One judgment for the cheap, tribal comfort of belonging to a group that thinks for you. The brilliance you seek is a distraction. The avoidance of these commonplace behaviors, unreliability, debt, and ideological possession, is the entire game. If you are 50 and you still haven't mastered basic reliability, financial prudence, and independent rational thought, you have learned nothing. You have merely survived. And survival without wisdom is just a slow, costly, and humiliating defeat. The triple cancer of the soul: envy, resentment, and self. Pity. There are three psychological vices, three simple, ugly behaviors that are guaranteed to destroy your peace, your judgment, and your future success, regardless of your capital. At 50, if these are still in your system, they are no longer youthful errors. They are terminal diseases. They are the standard response to life, and your entire job is to be none. Standard first, envy. The world is driven by envy, not greed. Greed, at least, is a desire for what you do not have. Greed is simple. Greed says, I want that. Envy is far more sinister. Envy says, I want you not to have that. It is the poison you drink hoping the other person will die. You look at the accomplishments, the possessions, the partnerships of others, and instead of taking a useful lesson, you take a self-inflicted wound. Why is the new luxury car your neighbor drives a source of internal pain for you? Because your ego is fundamentally fragile. It needs constant validation, and the moment another person's success illuminates your own current position, your sufficient position, your envy takes over. It destroys your ability to see clearly, Envy is a massive cognitive blocker. It is a bias of the mind that forces you to make irrational decisions. You buy the wrong stock, the one your friend bragged about, against your better judgment. You start the wrong business, one you have no talent for, simply because you must catch up to a perceived peer. This destructive chase guarantees you will fail, because you are not playing your own game. You are playing a game designed by your competitor's marketing department. You are a puppet, and your envy is pulling the strings. You must excise envy like a surgeon excises a tumor. It is utterly useless, profoundly painful, and completely self-inflicted. The moment you feel envy, you must recognize it as a signal, not that the other person is lucky, but that you are currently being irrational. Second, resentment. Resentment is the prolonged punishment of yourself for someone else's mistake. Someone wronged you in business, in a deal, in a relationship, and you have decided to carry that injury, that unfairness, with you every day. You relive the injustice, you rehearse the argument, you allow the toxic residue of a past event to corrupt your present judgment. This is fundamentally stupid. Your mind is your greatest tool, your most valuable asset. It is the instrument you use to navigate a complex, messy, and unfair world. And you willingly contaminate that instrument with the sludge of old, unfixable grievances. You are giving a person you despise free rent in your head. Charlie Munger himself had more than his fair share of hardship, a difficult divorce, the death of a son at age 9 from leukemia, partial blindness in one eye that forced him to retrain his entire career. These are real tragedies. Your grievances, most likely, are small and predictable byproducts of the general unfairness of the human condition. A partner cheated you, a boss took credit for your work. You were passed over for a promotion. This is the standard, predictable friction of life, and you are letting it destroy your one non-renewable resource. The time you have left to think clearly. You cannot be cheerful when your mind is mired in deep hatred and resentment. And if you cannot be cheerful, you cannot think clearly. Your ability to judge risk, to see opportunity, and to maintain the patience required for great success is destroyed the moment you allow resentment to take root. Forgive, not for them, but for the ruthless, self-interested necessity of your own future clarity. Third, self-pity. This is the quiet killer, the soft, seductive voice that tells you that you are a special case, that the rules don't apply, that your difficulties are unique, and that you deserve a better outcome than you have earned. Self-pity is the easiest and most common way to justify doing nothing. It is the perfect excuse for sloth. I can't save money. My expenses are uniquely high. I can't exercise. My genetics are bad. I can't learn. My education was poor. This is all just a sophisticated form of whining. It is the ultimate abdication of responsibility. If you are 50, you have seen enough of the world to know that life is not fair. It is not designed to be fair. It is a complex adaptive system that is mostly indifferent to your personal desires. It is designed to test your character. And the moment you succumb to self-pity, you are telling the world that your character is weak. You are opting out of the contest. Self-pity is the path to paranoia. You start to see conspiracy where there is merely incompetence or bad luck or the predictable consequences of your own bad decisions. Once paranoia sets in, your ability to rationally assess your environment is gone. You become ungovernable, unteachable, and fundamentally delusional. Envy, resentment, self-pity. Avoid these three. And you will have an immediate, enormous long-term advantage over nearly everyone else, because they are the standard response to the pain of existence. They are the cheap relief that cost you your entire life. Your goal at 50 is to train yourself out of these standard responses. to accept the harsh reality and to focus your energy only on what you can do, not what you deserve. The tyranny of the immediate, the patience tax, the most reliable way to spot a fool is by his impatience. And I see a staggering, almost pathological amount of it in people approaching or past 50. You had the opportunity for 30 years to allow the forces of compound interest, of compound knowledge, and of compound reputation to work in your favor. And most of you squandered it. You pulled the plant out of the soil every week to see if the roots were growing. You chased quick gains. You jumped from job to job, from strategy to strategy, from relationship to relationship, never staying anywhere long enough for the geometric magic of compounding to take effect. Now you feel the heat. You look at the diminishing calendar, and you mistake urgency for panic. You want to make up for 30 years of mediocre discipline in 5 years of hyperactivity. This is a fatal error. This is when you are most vulnerable. This is when the charlatan, the one promising 60% returns, the one selling the revolutionary new system, finds his easiest mark at 50. Patience is no longer a virtue. It is a tactical weapon. The world is moving faster than ever, generating more noise, more distraction, and more false signals. Your advantage lies in your ability to sit still, to think long term, and to do nothing until a genuinely favorable opportunity presents itself. This requires a mental fortitude that most 50-year-olds lack. They are too addicted to the action, the dopamine rush of the trade, the feeling of being busy. They confuse the continuous noise of the market with the subtle signal of a great opportunity. They forget that the greatest gains are made not by trading, but by waiting, by being consistently present in the arena, but only striking when the probability of success is overwhelming. Consider the compounding effect of wisdom, a small gain in knowledge, applied consistently over a long period, yields exponential results. But most people learn a new concept, a new mental model, a new piece of history, and they immediately stop applying it because the immediate result is not dramatic. They confuse the lack of fanfare with the lack of progress. You must embrace deferred gratification, not just financially, but intellectually and emotionally. You must be willing to postpone the satisfaction of certainty for the benefit of complex, nuanced understanding. You must be willing to look like a fool to the impatient crowd today so that you can reap a quiet, overwhelming advantage 5 years from now. The man who insists on immediate, high-stakes action will always be a pawn in the game. He is the one who buys at the top and sells at the bottom, driven by the twin impulses of greed and fear. The man who can patiently wait for the high probability pitch, who can let others chase the low, hanging, rotten fruit, is the one who ultimately controls the flow of wealth. Your greatest asset at 50 is not your cash. It is the sheer volume of foolishness you can afford to ignore. And ignoring requires nothing but patience. It is the most boring and most powerful superpower, the lattice of knowledge. Why you are still learning wrong. You have spent 5 decades acquiring knowledge, yet your thinking remains narrow. Why? Because you learned to specialize. You learned to silo your expertise. You became a technician in one small corner of the world, and you now look at every problem, financial, relational, political, through the narrow, distorted lens of your single discipline. This is the fundamental failure of modern education and the root of most high-level stupidity. The world does not respect your boundaries. It is a complex adaptive system, and its problems are inherently multidisciplinary. The mindset you need at 50 is the lattice work of mental models. This is not an academic exercise. It is the ultimate survival guide. You must stop seeing problems in isolation and start building a framework of big ideas from every major field: psychology, history, physics, biology, economics, literature, to the man with only a hammer. every problem looks like a nail. To the man who is only a financial analyst, every solution is a spreadsheet. He is blind to the psychological forces of envy and greed driving the market. He is blind to the biological principles of ecosystems and feedback loops that dictate how his competition will really react. When you look at a business decision, you must not only apply economics, the simple calculation of profit, but also fee inversion from mathematics. What is the easiest way this business will fail? Fate availability bias from psychology. Am I over? Weighting recent dramatic examples and ignoring long-term statistical reality. Am I buying this stock only because it has been in the news? Thinking ecosystems and feedback loops from biology systems theory. How will my action, like cutting prices, change the behavior of the competition, which will then change the behavior of my customers and loop back to destroy my initial advantage? Find reciprocity from psychology. What non-obvious social or financial obligations am I creating with this action? Who will feel they owe me? And more importantly, who will feel I owe them? For critical mass from physics, does this project have enough energy and resources to achieve a self-sustaining reaction, or am I just pouring capital into a void? Most of you don't do this. You have one hammer, and you treat every problem like a nail. You let one or two ideas from your narrow field dominate your entire worldview. The result is predictable, a life of continuous, unnecessary mistakes. You solve a problem in one area only to create a catastrophe in 3 others. Your task at 50 is to consciously, deliberately connect these fields. This is not about reading more books on your profession. It is about reading the core ideas, the big ideas from the outside disciplines. Read a history of the Roman Empire and ask what it teaches you about corporate decay. Read a biology textbook and ask what it teaches you about market competition. And crucially, you must commit to being wiser than you were when you woke up. This is the non-negotiable daily routine. Not smarter, but wiser. Smarts are innate. Wisdom is earned through the ruthless application of logic and a willingness to confront your own ignorance. The best way to get a new idea is to read. The best way to use an old idea is to constantly challenge it against a new discipline. If you stop learning at 50, you have essentially signed your own death warrant. The world will pass you by, and it will be a quiet, humiliating defeat because you will not even understand the new rules of the game being played around you. Complacency in your knowledge base is the fastest way to irrelevance. The ego and the self-serving fog, the ultimate blind spot. Your mind is a beautiful, powerful machine, and it is also a fundamental liar. At 50, your biggest single obstacle is not external. It is the self-serving bias, the ingrained, almost genetic tendency to believe that what is good for you is good for the world, and that your own past mistakes were caused by external forces. This is the psychological firewall against self-improvement. If you cannot admit you were wrong, you cannot learn. And if you cannot learn, your life is doomed to be a predictable loop of the same stupid errors, played out with different actors and higher stakes. You must assume that you are not immune to this bias. Assume that every decision you make, every memory you recall, every motive you attribute to your own actions is filtered through a thick, self-serving fog. The only path to objectivity is through a rigorous, almost violent skepticism of your own best thinking. This is where the power of external feedback comes in, but you have successfully insulated yourself against it. At 50, you are often surrounded by people who depend on you, employees, subordinates, perhaps adult children, and their primary goal is to please you, to avoid confronting your ego. You have, by your success, created a perfect bubble of delusion. You have become too important, too rich, or too expert To be criticized, you must pay for brutal honesty. You must seek out people who have no financial or emotional stake in your comfort, people who will not profit from your self-delusion. And you must listen when they tell you that your ideas are stupid, that your assessment is biased, or that your memory of past events is convenient fiction. Charlie Munger said you have to allow, in your own cognition and conduct for the self, serving bias of everybody else. This is true, but the primary application of that rule is to yourself. You are the most biased observer in your life. The great advantage of living past 50 is the sheer volume of experience, but that experience only becomes wisdom if you correctly label the events of the past. If you continue to rationalize your foolish conduct, that failure was bad luck, that success was pure genius, then your experience is useless. It is not a textbook, it is a fairy tale you are telling yourself. Most 50-year-olds do not have 50 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience repeated 50 times. The ultimate act of wisdom at this age is the consistent, deliberate practice of humility. Not the performative kind, not the false modesty of the successful man, but true intellectual humility. The kind that admits, my mind is a factory of bias. It is built to deceive me. I must find a way to check its output before I act. The moment you become convinced of your own objectivity, you have lost. The moment you believe you are beyond these simple psychological errors, you have become their most perfect victim. You have ceased to be a learner, and you have become a statue, an expensive, self-satisfied monument to past success, waiting to be knocked over by the next gust of reality. The art of knowing enough, simplicity, prudence, and the avoidance of crazy. You still think the game of life is about maximum advantage, maximum returns, and maximum effort. This is the young man S game, a fool, S errand, the mature mind. The mind that will survive the next 50 years understands the concept of sufficient. At 50, your goal is to be prudently rich, not astronomically rich. Your goal is to be reliably happy, not ecstatically, chemically dependent on constant stimulation. Your goal is to pursue the long term. Quiet compounding of safety. The ultimate mistake of the hyper-achiever is the inability to declare enough. They always need one more deal, one more zero, one more piece of leverage. This is not ambition. It is an addiction to risk, a sign of deep internal dissatisfaction. They trade the high probability of a very good outcome for the low probability of a catastrophic one, simply because they cannot control the psychological itch of more. They risk what they have and need for what they don't have and don't need. This is the definition of insanity. The true measure of a successful mindset at 50 is your capacity for prudence. Prudence is the active avoidance of insanity. It is the practice of steering clear of all conventional pitfalls. Prudence is simplicity. If you can't explain your investment thesis, your business model, or your retirement plan on the back of a business card, you are complicating it. Complexity is the friend of the fraudster and the enemy of the honest mind. You make things complicated because you are trying to be too smart, trying to justify an action that is fundamentally unsound, or trying to impress people who are just as confused as you are. Prudence is also the relentless practice of avoiding risks you are not properly compensated for. The financial world is full of people selling you lottery tickets dressed up as investment products. They promise you high returns with low probability, and you, driven by the envy of your peers, buy them. You should be buying certainties or near certainties that simply require patience. The greatest advice Munger ever gave: avoid crazy at all costs. Crazy is far more common than you think. It is the pervasive belief that this time is different. It is the idea that you can violate the basic rules of economics, human psychology, and mathematics and somehow emerge unscathed. It is the belief that short-term volatility is the path to long-term wealth. It is the cryptocurrency you bought at the peak. It is the over-leveraged real estate deal. It is the startup you invested in that had no product, no revenue, and no business model, but a very charismatic founder. If you are 50, you have the historical context to know what is crazy. Yet you still listen to the young, zealous ideologues who preach the gospel of the new, the disruptive, the volatile. They will talk about disruption. You must think about survival. They will talk about new paradigms. You must think about timeless human behavior. The power of knowing enough gives you the strength to say number, no to the over, to the high. States trade, no to the over. Leveraged house, no to the toxic relationship, no to the next new venture that requires you to spend 3 years rebuilding your entire life. Your energy is limited. Your time is finite. You must preserve both for the battles that truly matter. The path to long-term success is marked by a vast graveyard of opportunities you had the wisdom to walk past. The last lesson of subtractive synthesis, we have not discussed how to be brilliant. We have discussed how to achieve a massive, non-obvious long-term advantage by simply being consistently not stupid. This is your final advantage, the core of the mindset you require now. The man who consistently avoids the big mistakes, the self-pity, the envy, the overspending, the complexity, the impatience, the self-serving bias, will find that the rest of the game takes care of itself. Life is long enough for the disciplined, but shockingly short for the impulsive. Your job at 50 is not to chase wealth, but to fortify the foundation you have already built. Fortify your mind. Stop listening to those who validate your stupidity. Build the lattice work of knowledge. Invert every problem. Be the relentless, cold critic of your own best ideas. Fortify your character. Excise the cancer of envy and resentment. Be reliable, predictable, and simple in your promises. Do what you said you would do. Accept that the world is unfair and that self-pity is a choice to fail. Fortify your position. Stop seeking maximum returns and start seeking maximum certainty. Embrace prudence. Know what enough is, and let the fools chase the high-risk, low-probability mirage. You are playing the end game now. You are competing against people who are too emotional, too impatient, and too unwilling to learn the simple, brutal lessons of human history. Your edge is the simple, quiet, almost boring dedication to being consistently rational when everyone around you is succumbing to the standard, predictable insanity. The final question is not what will I do next, but what am I finally willing to stop doing? The answer to that question is your entire future. If this relentless logic, if this commitment to the high bar of rationality and self, criticism resonates with the urgency you now feel, then you should acknowledge it. Take a moment to hit the like button and share this message with someone who, like you, is in the final stretch where every decision carries immense, irreversible weight. The compounding of wisdom requires action, not applause. So I urge you to comment with the one single bad habit, the one predictable stupidity that you will subtract from your life starting today. That is the only real homework. Continue your journey by watching the video that appears now on your screen.